Coming to you from an undisclosed location somewhere in the northern hemisphere, waiting out the alien apocalypse. He is armed with a machete and a microphone. This is the Mysterious Outpost.
What's up, guys? If you're swinging by for the first time, please subscribe and make sure you click on the notification bell. That will give you all recent notifications of every video that gets uploaded. That is one way you can help support this channel. Welcome to Mysterious Outpost Radio. This is your host, Mike Blocker. Tonight on the show, I've been waiting to have this man on forever. His name is Olav Phillips. He has a website, which is paranoiamagazine.com. You can go check out the articles on there. Subscribe to his magazine. I'm telling you, this guy, you can find him everywhere on YouTube. He has a couple of cool lectures that he has done also on a secret space program. But he's pretty much very well knowledgeable in every aspect of the alternative side, especially with the secret space program, UFOs, the paranormal, and some ancient mysteries too. And I tell you what, this guy, I feel like I say many times before, I feel like a fat kid in a candy store right now. How the hell you doing, Olav?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Not bad. I've been waiting for this because I listened to one of your interviews, man, many years ago. And I tell you, this is going to be exciting, and we're just going to limit this, try to condense I'm going to pick your brain as much as I can within the next hour. Are you ready?
Bring it.
Okay, let's go ahead and start with the secret space program. So, but pre-show, you said we need to take it back a little further. What do you mean by that? Well, how far do we need to take this thing back?
So there's a dude, his name is Walter Bosley. Walter is an amazing researcher. Mm-hmm. And Walter is obsessed with the mysterious airships of 1897. And in the whole deal with the mysterious airships, there's a NIMSA and the Sonora Aero Club and these mysterious airships that were flying around. There was a guy named Charles Delshow. Delshow, he did this weird collage art. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so obviously Walter is very interested in this, and he has gone through all the images with a fine-tooth comb. And you can buy big books that have all of Delshow's art, printed out. And Walter is an investigator, and he has gone through it very carefully, and he has found evidence that the bell, which is the core component to Nazi UFOs and a whole lot of other Kecksburg and a whole lot of other stuff. He's found evidence of the bell in Delshow's art of airships from the late 1800s.
That's crazy.
So it is crazy.
Now the thing is, who is behind these? I guess the technology back then. Of course, because now it's part of the cabal, the elite, I guess rogue groups within the government. Who was it back then, do you think?
Well, there's no easy answer to that. He's actually researching that right now. I think he's about to put out another book on it. Mm-hmm. He does get into the new issue that we've been working on for way too long of Paranoia. He wrote an amazing article about it, so that should be coming in the next couple weeks. But really, there are a few possibilities, and it really comes down to who's NIMSA.
Yeah.
And NIMSA is obviously a Prussian organization. You do research on it, but what does that really mean? So if you want to go all the way back, my gut instinct, not knowing what Walter's found, I kind of lean on Walter and bend his direction because he's just done an insane amount of work on it. Mm-hmm. But if I had to put my finger on it, I would say it's probably one of these perceived mysterious pre-cultures that existed, somewhere around 10 to 14,000 years ago. And this centers into the whole Mahabharata and the Vimanas and ancient India and all that. I would probably argue to you is probably, being somewhat ignorant of what he's discovered, I would suggest to you is probably one of those guys.
And it's crazy how the name you said Nimza.
Nimza.
Now, okay, this reminds me. It's not really off topic now.
Okay.
The last Mimsy. Have you seen the movie?
No.
Mimsy,
Heard about it.
Nimza, Menza. You know, I got this thing with words, wordplay, and numerology also.
Oh,
But if
oh,
you,
talk to Walter, because Walter actually took it apart, because a lot of people believe that it means like New York Model Zephyr Association or something like that. And Walter's actually a linguist. One of his occupations was as a linguist, and Walter broke it apart, and he has the only, I think, valid translation for NIMSA, and it basically comes down to like state-sponsored Department of Airship Development or something like that. But definitely talk to Walter Bosley.
I definitely will have him on the
Oh yeah,
show.
and
And just it's not really a spoiler. I guess a little bit spoiler alert just for the ones who have not seen the movie. I'm just going to give just a tidbit of the towards the end, but just to break it all down, the the humans were actually up underneath like this. It's been a while, so I'm trying to remember exactly how it was, but there was these gray reptilians,
oh wow,
and they were actually, I think, in human form, but up
okay,
underneath the human form, you know, just like the reptilians and the shapeshifters and stuff like that. But they were actually the gray reptilians.
oh wow,
I need to refresh my memory. It was crazy. I'm like, the symbolism in this movie is
sure,
so just like the show, mysterious. But
right.
but I definitely recommend you. It's more of a kids movie, but I just watched it, flip through the channels, you know, one night watching TV, and it was on there, and I was like, whoa, this was maybe 5 6
Well,
years ago. But
you know,
go ahead.
you'd be surprised. You know, you said it's a kids movie. It's like, you know, I happen to be a fan of Scooby Doo, because
Hmm.
when I was a little kid, you know, I got a few years on you. When I was a little kid, Scooby Doo was the shiznit.
You can cuss on the show if you need to.
Okay, it was the shit, and I really enjoyed Scooby, and I hate Scrappy.
Hmm.
That's a conspiracy by itself, Scrappy Doo. But not too long ago, they came out with a new version of Scooby Doo called Mystery Incorporated. And if you watch Mystery Incorporated, it is pretty much the encyclopedia of Zachariah Sitchin. It's all the Sitchin stuff and a lot of conspiracy stuff all wound together in it.
Hmm.
So definitely, you know, it's a kid's show, but it's deeply rooted. And then, you know, you got shows like Gravity Falls. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
Bill Cipher is literally the Illuminati symbol. So I mean, I just stopped there.
Yes, and I need to have you on just to talk about, I don't know, the paranormal. Maybe have a show with you in the future about the paranormal extraterrestrial symbolism in movies in Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
Because a lot of people, just like Freeman and other researchers out there, they like to talk about Hollywood occult symbolism. I would like to talk to you about Hollywood extraterrestrial symbolism or
Oh yeah.
paranormal symbolism, because I've heard you on other interviews talk about that you are a fan of movies in general, and I
Yeah.
am too. Because there's so many. It's fun whenever you see these movies and you see the symbolism at play, and you're like, "What the hell is going on here? Is this like a form of soft disclosure?"
Well, they say that it's predictive programming, that they're
Hmm.
showing it to you on in a film to prepare you for that revelation. But I'll give you a great example. You wanted to talk about the secret space program. We
Hmm.
got a bit derailed. If you ever watch Moonraker, you know, my when I was a kid,
It's been a while, Olaf.
that James Bond era was my childhood, right?
Hmm.
Well, go watch Moonraker, because the space station that Drax builds at the end has an uncanny resemblance to a structure that was seen in a Soho image, that has an uncanny resemblance to a 19 I want to say it was like a 1959 Air Force NASA concept drawing of a space station.
Wow.
And
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 that's
Drax is living out, you know, the whole Alternative 3 thing, that he is trying he is trying to create the Ubermensch, the Superman, the blonde hair, blue eyed Superman to repopulate the Earth. You know, so he's living out that kind of fantasy that the Germans cooked up in World War II. So I mean, there's a lot of, well, pre World War II, but there's a lot of symbolism just in Moonraker, or
Hmm.
Diamonds Are Forever when they have the fake moon landing set. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's buried in movies. That's just James Bond.
Yeah, and 2001 Space Odyssey,
Oh, sure.
that's huge symbolism, huge.
Well, and the fact that a lot, and it's funny you mentioned that because I'm wearing my Kubrick moon landing shirt. A lot of people like Jay Widener have fingered Kubrick as having done it because
And go ahead.
he had the technical capability. And I think that Widener has shown a lot of evidence that there's a lot of rear projection screen work that was done during the moon landing photos.
So let's go and get into that. We may be bouncing back. We may go back in time, but let's stay on that topic right now. So tell me, do you think that we actually went to the moon during the Apollo days, and or do you think that we did go to the moon, but not necessarily in the Apollo days, but they used Kubrick to fake these videos?
So my answer to that is that, given what I've researched and what I think, is that I think we went to the moon. I
Hmm.
absolutely think that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, and they're national heroes. And I think that we should all be listening to Buzz Aldrin right now when he's pushing to go to Mars and to do these things.
I
But
agree.
but they landed off target. I think they landed in an uncleaned area. I think that there's a lot of controversy about alternative tapes of radio traffic between various astronauts of various missions, and mission control. Them saying things like, "I can see fuzzy lights in the sky" and all this stuff. But I think that basically, at least with the Apollo 11 landing, that they landed off target and they landed in an unsanitized area. And I think that they didn't know, and they walked around and they did what they were supposed to do, and they had a triumphant, landing on the moon and whatever. And I think that after the fact, NASA went and cleaned it up. And they lost the footage for decades, all of it. So I think
Do you
that
think they really lost it, or it just got swept away?
I think that the footage got put into a separate storage unit to make sure that it got cleaned up. I think that
So
fixed it.
so when they were up there, because I'm a proponent. I know NASA a lot of they do have that bad reputation, never a straight answer,
That's right.
but but you can't label everybody within NASA as evil or as
Absolutely.
because that's you can't do that. That's just like
No.
within the government. Not everybody in the government. I used to work part of the government, just like I told you. I was in the
Right.
military. I don't consider myself as bad. Yes, we had. It's just we got corruptness everywhere.
Yeah.
But I really am digressing a little bit. But back to the moon, Olav. When they were up there, do you think that it is possible they encountered something of maybe just like in the 2001 Space Odyssey, they encountered
Yeah.
the monument. Do you think
The model.
the monolith? Do you think they came across something like that on the moon, or possibly
Maybe.
extraterrestrial beings?
Maybe. I think that the Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin certainly did not. But I think that there were things in the distance. That's why when you watch the lunar rover footage, it's like Looney Tunes. It's like
Hmm.
the same mountain, the same mountain, the same mountain, the same mountain. And there have been a lot of studies of the footage that confirm that it's the same mountain, and it just keeps appearing. So I think that they edited stuff out that you could see in the distance. There is a story of Apollo 20, um, that this is an Apollo mission that would have gone 2 missions beyond the actual end of the Apollo program. And
Yeah.
supposedly Apollo 20 was launched from Vandenberg, went to the moon, and basically went inside the carcass of a alien spaceship. And what's interesting about it is that on the surface of it, you watch the footage and you think to yourself, "This is insane."
Hmm.
Um, I may be a conspiracy geek, but it's sometimes the stuff, it's like, that's too crazy. In this case, excuse me, in this case, what's actually interesting is that if you go and look at the NASA photography of the area where they say this thing was, it's there. You can find it in the NASA photos, and it's enormous. It's like a mile long. It's kind of cylindrical. It has weird markings on it.
Hmm.
So this guy, the whole story of this guy Rutledge, who supposedly exposed Apollo 20, it's BS. He says his English was bad because he fell in love with a woman in Rwanda, of all the terrible places to go live, and he moved to Rwanda to be with his soulmate. It's total horseshit. But what it is that there's a lot of really interesting footage. And at one point, there was an artist, he was like a performance artist in France, and people had fingered him as being the guy who faked Apollo 20. The problem is that there are minute details within Apollo 20 that make no sense for him to have faked. I mean, he would have had to go to a lot of trouble. He would have literally had to rebuild the LEM, right?
Hmm.
He would have had to rebuild the spacesuits, but you could buy spacesuits on eBay, fake ones. But one thing that's interesting is he would have actually had to have etched the glass, because the altitude excuse me, the altitude indicators are etched on the glass. And so he would have had to have actually etched that on the glass. And then this is the one thing that I find fascinating, is that when they landed, there's a point where Rutledge, the guy who's supposedly the commander, Rutledge is taking the camera and he's kind of sticking it out those triangular windows in the front.
Hmm.
And when you look down, you can see this weird tracked thing. And that weird track thing is called a Lukenhold. And it was actually a Russian lunar probe that had 8 wheels, and it would truck around and it could do like soil analysis and stuff.
Hmm.
Well, the reason that makes sense is because the Lukenhold has a transponder, so the Soviets could find it, and it has a transmitter. And so if you want to use some sort of a beacon to land against, finding one of these Lukenholds, or something else that has a transmitter like a beacon, it would make it incredibly easy to find it. And if this Lukenhold was adjacent to this object, which apparently it is, actually in reality fairly close by, then you have an instant landing beacon. Now, he would have had to have known about this object from NASA. It's in an obscure set of photos. He would have had to have known about that. He would have had to understand what a Lukenhold was, what it looked like, and rebuilt one. He would have had to have built a complete LEM. And the kicker is that they retrieved a body from supposedly they retrieved the body in a head. The other pilot, apparently his body was severely damaged, but they retrieved a body. And I did a show. I was on a show called Ground Zero.
Hmm.
Clyde got this guy on who was a mortician. And the mortician, this guy was a licensed mortician in the state of Oregon. This guy looked at the body and, he said, okay, well, it's video, so there's only so much I can tell you, but the waxy buildup on it, this thing looks like a freeze-dried body. And he's like, I'm telling you, as a mortician, this looks like an actual body. And so they retrieved a body. They retrieved a bunch of weird writing that looks like something out of Lord of the Rings. It looks like Elvish.
They retrieved this from the moon, Olav?
Yeah, from a crashed spaceship on the moon. Yeah.
Was it on the dark side or the far side?
It's on the far side.
That's crazy. So, now with the things like with NASA, why does it seem that they want to keep this? Well, before I get into this is why NASA gets a bad reputation, because of course they do keep things from the public. And that's why everybody likes to label them as everything's fake. Everything's fake, since they're keeping some things from the public.
They do some great work.
Yeah, exactly. So, but why do you think they are keeping a lot of this from the public? What is it? What are they afraid of, Olav?
Well, if you believe the Brookings study, they're afraid of a massive panic and societal breakdown. The Brookings study, they got a bunch of anthropologists, sociologists, historians, psychologists all into a big room. They said, well, what would happen if people figured out the aliens were real? And the result was that people would go insane. There'd be a total breakdown of Western civilization, etc. And so, they're afraid. Plus, at this point, you also have to remember is that so much sketchy stuff has been done for so long that to come clean about any of it exposes the rest of it.
Very true. Yes, and so I interviewed John Lear a few weeks
Oh
ago.
yeah, I love John.
Yes, he is right up because I'm the type just like your website, with your Paranoia Magazine. I'm that guy. I'm that paranoid guy. Of course, all in good ways, but and I'm that tinfoil wearing hat guy. So
Same
with
here.
John stated uh, that there are, and I created a video. It's pushing 15,000 views, I think, as of right now, a little segment within that interview with John Lear talking about that there are 250 million people on the lunar surface or on the moon, either on the surface and or within the moon. So tell me, Olav, with your research, and maybe asking you to speculate, but we're having fun. We're just having a conversation here. This doesn't mean you believe it. We're just having a cool conversation. Tell me your thoughts. What do you think that there is a civilization up there? And do you think there could be possibly people within the moon also?
Well, I one of my favorite videos of all time is a lecture that John Lear gave on mining operations on the moon,
Hmm.
and it was a pretty compelling. It was a pretty compelling presentation, and I really believe it. 1 billion people on the moon.
He said 250 million,
A
I
quarter of a
believe.
billion, 250 million people on the moon. It's possible. I don't know how many people. I think they're
Hmm.
there. As early as the late 50s, the Air Force and the Army drew up plans that by 1961, they wanted, which predates Apollo, they wanted to have, I think the Army wanted to have like 150 soldiers on the moon, and the Air Force wanted to have like 43 soldiers on
Hmm.
the moon. It's called Operation Horizon and Operation Lunex. The Soviets had a plan called Zvezda, where they wanted to put like 300 people on the moon, and that's in the early 60s. So
Now, for
I'm
my
not
next
gonna put
question,
a number
Olav,
on it. A lot.
do what, Olav?
I'm not going to put a number on it, but I'd say there are a lot. I don't know that there are that many.
I was just wanting to get your opinion, really, not real necessarily on the number, if more on
Sure.
if there are actually people up there right now,
Oh, yeah.
either us or ETs.
I think we're there. I
Okay.
think we've got a lot of people there.
And now I'm about to ask you to give the audience a rundown of alternative three.
Okay.
The reason being, I want to still stay focused on the moon aspect, but go ahead before, because I didn't want to jump through. I think it's, you'll correct me here in just a minute, but I think it's the third alternative, something with the moon, I believe. But
All
anyways, go through 1 through 3, and
right.
then I will ask you the next question from there.
Okay. So basically, Alternative 3 was a mockumentary that was shown in 1977 in England. It is a mockumentary. It was, but I would argue to you that it is structurally real, that it
Hmm.
is a blueprint for the end of the world. Basically, in the late 50s, there was a meeting. According to the documentary, there was a meeting. They figured out we were screwed, and they came up with 3 alternatives to fix it. In the late 50s, there was a meeting. There's a guy named Roger Revelle, who's part of Scripps Oceanographic Institute. He figured out that phytoplankton, the air scrubbers of the sea, weren't cutting it, and pretty much figured out we were screwed. There are 3 alternatives. The first was to blow a hole in the upper atmosphere and vent the carbon dioxide into space. This was this was attempted on a project called Hardtack Argus, the highest nuclear detonation in history. 2 of them. It failed to vent the carbon dioxide into space because that's ludicrous. The second alternative was to build bunkers. There are many people who can give you a much better rundown on bunkers than I can. But I'm just going to say that we both know that there are a lot of bunkers, a lot
Hmm.
of big bunkers. And then the third alternative was to relocate to Mars by way of the moon. And so the reason that makes sense is because in the mid 40s, during World War II, FDR commissioned a study called the M Project that was led by a guy named Henry Fields, and Henry Fields was an eminent anthropologist, and actually, his family owned Fields Department Store, and I believe he founded the Fields Museum in Chicago, and so he led this all-star group of anthropologists and other people to figure out how people would migrate in the event of a catastrophic war or climate collapse, and he basically came to the assessment that we're screwed and we should probably go to Mars because going to Alpha Centauri would take too long. So, and
Well,
it was financed. It was black budget. I think FDR paid $1 million in 1940s dollars for this project to go, and it was classified up into I think the 70s. And then when Field got a hold of it, Fields could not get it published, so he published it himself, and it's now out there. But the end result of all this was that to relocate to Mars.
and since we have a little better understanding of the alternatives 1 through 3, and the
Right.
third one to go to Mars via the moon. Now the thing is with the moon, because I wanted to stay on the moon just for the time being. Now, do
Sure.
you think that, because you just stated that we probably have people up there right now, and so it makes me think, Olav, so is the moon, are we actually in these stages of alternative 3 right now? Because if there are people up there, like you stated, John Lear states, I believe that there are people up there also.
Mhm.
Do you think that the moon is being prepped, being readied as an outpost for these things that will be happening in the future?
Yeah.
So these alternatives are already actually being played out. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally do. And it also shows up in other odd ways that, not just the moon. I think the moon's like a waypoint. And plus, they've got helium-3 up there, titanium, all kinds of nutty stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that you can look at is that, the Chinese have a long history of dealing with issues on a multi-generational basis. That the Chinese have always kind of played the long game, and they think about things 50 or 100 years in the future. And for a while, there were these stories about these ghost cities that had popped up. I think there's like 2 in Africa, and then there's like 6 in China. And so I got curious about it one day. And so this is usually how it comes to me. I took a map and I plotted where the ghost cities are. And then I overlaid the flood pattern, assuming that there is some kind of sea level rise. And wouldn't you know it, that a bunch of the cities are just outside the flood pattern. And if the sea levels do rise, these guys will be sitting on a beach. And then I thought to myself, well, there's at least one city that's out by Mongolia. I mean, it's way out there. And I took a look at the disposition of glaciers in the last ice age. And wouldn't you know it, was just outside the glacial line. So, maybe they built them because they had a lot of extra money laying around that they wanted to spend, or they needed to make a couple million people do something for a year or 2 or 3 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
But the positions of these things are awfully odd because they correspond to flood patterns and glacier lines. So I think that it very well may be a keep people busy job, but at the same time, there's a purpose. So I definitely think we're in alternative 3 now. Because I mean, you can always find people to debate you whether climate change is real or not.
Yeah.
I'm not here to argue with you whether it's human or natural or some combination. I'll let the listeners decide what they decide is the cause, because it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
But one day during the summer, I walked out of my house and it was 132 degrees. And I have lived in that area since I was 6 years old, and it has never been 132 degrees. That tells me something.
Yeah, there's something strange going on here.
I live, it rains here in the winter, and I went for an entire winter or two with literally no rain. I have never seen that in my whole life. Now, Guy McPherson will tell you that within the next 5 years or 10 years, even not even 10 years, we're going to see a total collapse. I don't know, but I know that somebody's preparing for it.
Now,
It
go ahead, Olaf.
What I was also going to say is that another thing that's called for inside of Alternative 3 is this concept of batch consignments. Batch consignments are basically people who are kidnapped and taken up into these bases to function as slave labor. There's a guy named David Paulides. I always pronounce his name wrong. No disrespect.
I tend to do that myself.
He's a fantastic writer, and he's got amazing books, But I took a map that I found where he had taken push pins, kind of old school. I liked it. He had taken push pins and put push pins where people disappear in these national parks, and there were concentrations, which you would imagine. And so I took a map that was made in the early 1990s by a guy named Tall, which purported to show underground UFO bases, because Tall is of the opinion that they're aliens. I'm of the opinion that they're humans, but I think they're there. Mm-hmm. And so when I overlaid the maps, I had to kind of skew it a little bit because the maps didn't match correctly, but I think I got all the points to match so that it's pretty accurate. And wouldn't you know it, that these concentrations sit on top of where Tall said they're UFO bases. That makes sense. If you want to disappear a bunch of people, put them on a UFO cattle car and fly them up into space. So we see the elements of these things happening, like Argus, like the bunkers. We see weird objects on Mars. I found one called the Facility. Even Buzz Aldrin, he had an interview. He was talking about Magnificent Desolation, his book, and he was on C-SPAN. And he turns and looks into the camera. He says, there's a monolith on one of the moons of Mars. And he said, I don't know who put it there. God put it there, aliens, maybe the universe put it there. But there's a monolith on one of the moons of Mars, and we need to go back there. And he was talking about this, and then the guy who was interviewing him kind of looked confused, and then he said, "Oh, hey Buzz, we've got a call on line 2." And it was some guy, who wanted to talk about some airlock patent, because Buzz Aldrin's a very well-educated guy, brilliant engineer. He had developed an airlock, like a universal airlock, and this guy wanted to talk about it. And it's like, okay, end of Buzz Aldrin's tirade. And that's Buzz Aldrin. And he's saying that there's a monolith on Phobos.
So do you think that they were giving like a form of soft disclosure with the movie 2001 Space Odyssey?
No. Well, maybe.
Because I guess I kind of believe, Olav, that the cabal, the elite, there's so many names for these figureheads, it's crazy. But now but I believe that they are in touch. They're in league with something. You can call it ET, the ether, consciousness, whatever it is. They're in touch with something. And now the thing is, and with Stargate SG-1, are you a fan of Stargate SG-1?
I love Stargate and Stargate SG-1.
And now with Stargate SG-1, at the end credits, you might be familiar with the end credits. It says something like, "We would like to thank the Department of Defense, the Air Force, and blah 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 for helping with the whatever." It says that in the end credits, and it's like they're throwing this in our face. And but just tell me your thoughts on that, Olav. Do you think that there are these figureheads, the cabal, whatever name you want to use, do you think that they are giving these soft disclosures with movies, or do you think that they actually know what's going on out there?
Well, I think they know what's going on. I do think that there's some preparation that's done through the movies. I think that Kubrick's basically my favorite director. Mm-hmm. pretty much. And I think that Kubrick was brilliant. And I think that Kubrick was maybe aware of some of the things that were going on at that time. I don't know that we had anything that complicated on the moon at that time, at the time of 2001. But he even NASA admits that he filmed the moon better than they did because he's that talented. And so that's why there are a lot of stories about Kubrick faking the moon landing. And there was a mockumentary done some time ago called, like, was it Dark Moon or Dark Side of the Moon or something, where they
Yeah.
kind of led the idea that he had done it for this lens for Barry Lyndon. And, I actually don't have a problem with that. I think that Kubrick's the kind of guy where he would have done that. And I wonder if, because that mockumentary came out of nowhere. And I think we need to pay attention to mockumentaries because they make us laugh, but we remember. And I wonder if maybe he didn't, because the way, Barry Lyndon is a very low light film and he needed a special lens. And he really did get one from NASA to shoot part of it, because they had cameras that were designed for low light conditions. They had special film stock for extreme low light conditions and stuff that could survive X-ray radiation. So, who knows? I think that that's probably a good explanation. And I think that maybe he was prompted a little bit, right? I mean, the story was originally written by Arthur C. Clarke, definitely part of the military industrial complex, and it was a short story called The Sentinel. And so suddenly Arthur C. Clarke's short story becomes a film. Then Kubrick makes the film, and then Arthur C. Clarke writes the book while Kubrick's making the film. Seems kind of strange.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, I have a T-shirt on right now that says, Apollo 11, a Stanley Kubrick production. So, I obviously have a bend toward that.
You're a badass.
and he put other things in The Shining, the boy wearing the rocket shirt and the shapes of the carpet and a lot of that. So there's hints.
And just like I stated, we're going to definitely do a show in the future about this type of symbolism. Yeah. But
also, don't forget Eyes Wide Shut, right? Eyes Wide Shut, the last one he made, and it's an ode to the quote unquote Illuminati.
Mm-hmm.
This is how they supposedly do things. There is another movie that supposedly shows the Skull and Bones rituals called the Bell, which with Glenn Ford. But there's a long history of this kind of stuff. I mean, you look at Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right? Nobody ever thinks about it, but when you're watching the very beginning, Francois Truffaut's running around. He's supposed to be Jacques Vallée. It's not a mistake that he's French. Vallée, he's representative of Vallée, and a lot of people believe that the ending sequence of Close Encounters is what happened at Edwards. Right, the Edwards UFO landing.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some people, I don't know that I believe that much in Serpo, but there are some people that believe that the exchange of astronauts is based on something called Serpo. So, it's one of those things. It just really comes down to what you want. But Jay Widener is by far the super uber expert on Kubrick and the moon landing.
He is.
By far. I love Kubrick's Odyssey.
And I'm glad to have him on in the future as well.
Yeah.
But I did try to email him, and he was very busy at the time doing some conferences. Yeah. And I said, I'll get back with you. But let's move forward with the little time that we have left, Olav, with the secret space program. We touched on the moon, of a little bit of this symbolism in the movies. And so let's skip forward a little bit with the secret space program. I know we're kind of skipping a little bit everywhere, but this is an open discussion. We just kind of having a casual conversation in a mysterious outpost, if you catch my drift. So with the secret space program, now you stated there are people on the moon. Is that a part of the secret space program? And if so, are they connected with NASA, or is NASA just a front civilian agency and the real meat and potatoes is behind the scenes doing all the dirty work?
I think so. NASA's complicated. But to make it simple, yeah, I think it's a front, and I think that there are people behind the scenes running the show. Because I don't think it's just us. I think the Russians are there, the Chinese are there, ESA is there, we're there, the Irish are there. Well, they're part of ESA, but the Indians are there, South Africans are there, the Australians are there, everybody's there. I think everybody's on the moon, everybody's on Mars. It's a global operation.
Hmm.
But I think that NASA, the ESA, and these others, they're fronts. The problem is, and I think there are a lot of amazing scientists at Caltech and other places that do amazing work, that are doing legit amazing work. We're not talking about that. I think that what they're doing is what they think they're doing, and there's no cover up there. I think they're honest, amazing engineers and scientists, and there's another group somewhere that's actually doing this other stuff. But there's an interesting thing about NASA that under JFK, not long before he was assassinated, apparently he wrote a series of memos, and they're called the Burn memos. And you can, you know, you, there's some controversy about their legitimacy, but if you take them at face value, one of them is basically instructing the director of NASA to brief the director of CIA and I believe the DoD at the time, the defensive and offensive capabilities of NASA. Well, NASA doesn't have offensive or defensive capabilities because it's a purely scientifically run civilian organization where everybody that has any kind of power was in the military. All the pilots originally were in the military. Half their payloads were classified. It's a very shady operation at times. The second Burn memo is that he instructed the director of NASA to work with the State Department to talk to the Soviets to confirm which are theirs and which are ours, because we don't actually accidentally want to shoot one of theirs down. Well, that's great. I don't want anybody to get shot down. I'm a pretty peaceful guy. But NASA does not have defensive capabilities. NASA lacks the capability to shoot things down. If anybody's going to shoot anything down, it's supposed to be the Air Force.
Hmm.
The Air Force has sole combat jurisdiction in space. They have Space Command. They supposedly have rumors say that Star Wars was fully deployed, right? But this stuff's all under Space Command. This isn't under NASA. So I do think that NASA is a front. I don't think that they're knowingly a front necessarily. I think at times they are, but it depends on who you talk to. And there's a fantastic movie that I got to sneak in here called Avalanche. I loved it, and it's about faking the moon landing. And if you watch Avalanche, you'll kind of get a feeling for, I think, the way things are and the way things work.
Sweet. I just wrote that down. Avalanche, right?
Avalanche.
So with the secret space program now, where I guess where do we need to talk more with the secret space program? We need to talk about I guess, of course, not NASA. So I guess we need to talk about now I guess what I'm trying to say, Olav, who is backing this program? Is it the cabal, the elite? And now the thing is, and part two of the question is, I know you probably get asked this all the time, but why? What is the purpose? Because I feel like, what is the purpose of the secret space program? Because I feel like it may be used for two things or multiple things. It could be used for, just like you stated, with space defense. It could be used such with these alternative threes, and they're actually with a depopulation agenda going on, we all know the Georgia Guidestones keeping humanity within 500 million.
And Agenda 21.
Do what?
Agenda 21.
And Agenda 21. And so is this secret space program, I guess, what is this major, I guess, focus? What is the major drive of the program? Is it really for the alternative three, or is it some other thing like space defense, or just for the betterment for humanity, which I don't really think so.
I don't think it's that. We'll just take that one off the table. That's too positive. Well, I think that it's like anything else. It's multi-purpose, right? I think on one hand, it is absolutely for alternative three and that concept of survival. I mean, why do you have 12 seed vaults scattered around the earth? People see
Hmm.
Svalbard, and they think that that's the only seed vault in the world, and it's not. There were 13, the magic number. There were 13, but one was destroyed when Mount Pinatubo went off. So now there are 12. But there are preparations being made. So I think an important chunk of it um, is related to alternative three and this notion of survival. I think part of it is space defense, and we're too late in this interview for me to really go into that.
Hmm.
Well, let's just say that I think there are space Nazis. I'll just start and end there, and we can talk about it ad nauseum sometime if you feel like it. But I absolutely think there are space Nazis, and no, they don't build swastikas shaped moon bases. That's a load of crap. But I think there are definitely space Nazis from Base 211 and Hans Kammler and the Bell and all that stuff. I just think they're on Venus, which is crazy enough as it is. But I think there is some level of space defense from those guys. I think there is research being done, but I think most of it is alternative three and space defense. And one of the things that I would point out is that the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, when he did a alumni dinner, and Jan Harzan, who's the head of MUFON, MUFON's its own discussion as well, but
Hmm.
he's the head of MUFON. He was there because he's a Caltech alumni, and the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, literally, Jan Harzan said, not only do I have the technology to take ET home, I have the contract.
Hmm.
Head of Lockheed Skunk Works makes a bold statement like that. He's got something to back it up.
That's a
So
crazy statement, right? Just to
yeah,
even say that.
to even say that, to have the balls to say that, I mean that's incredible. So there's definitely something cooking up there, and like I said, I think a chunk of it is alternative three. I think a chunk of it is also space defense.
Now, with the secret space program, okay, I do want to leave the space Nazis alone for now.
Okay.
What you're talking about, because I actually I thought about asking you questions with that too, but I didn't even write it with my notes because I wanted to save that
Uh-huh.
for a future time.
Sure.
And
Complicated.
yes, exactly, and that we can do a whole discussion just on that. But anyways, but I do want to discuss the Nazis just a little bit
Okay.
now. Do you think that we got most of this technology from the Nazis? And is that because they were in league with whatever it was, the Vril Society, the Thule Society, and they were in league with extraterrestrials, maybe the Nordics? What's your take on that?
Well, I think the Nordics are space Nazis. I think that they definitely did get it from the Vril Society and the Thule Society, but I think that the Vril Society, the Thule Society, were fronts for NIMSA. I think those can ultimately be traced back to NIMSA. As far as us, I think we got it from the Nazis, and I think we got it from where NIMSA got it. There was a competing factor to NIMSA, and that was the Sonora Aero Club. And I think that we got the basis of our program from the competitors to NIMSA,
Hmm.
because NIMSA was German. It was actually Prussian. So I think that the American equivalent to that, the Sonora Aero Club, was the basis for ours. And I think that they ultimately got the technology from ancient India. But I eagerly await Walter Bosley's research to see what he thinks, because he's got a better handle on it than me. But I definitely think that we got it from the Sonora Aero Club. They got it from NIMSA, and NIMSA passed it to them through front organizations like the Vril Society and the Thule Society. And you also have to remember is that at the time during World War II, that the SS had the Ahnenerbe, and the Ahnenerbe were scouring the earth for this stuff, right? That they, under Hans Schiffer, they had gone to Tibet to find Shambhala and Agartha, these mysterious high tech cities in the Himalayas. They were looking for Atlantis. They were looking for Lemuria. They were looking for Ultima Thule, which is another island in the North Sea. They were looking for High Brazil, which is an island off the coast of Ireland. You know, they were looking for witches that could be oracles and, you know, detonating nuclear bombs in the Baltic Sea. And I mean, they were doing all kinds of crazy stuff.
Do you think they actually found something in Antarctica?
I think they built something in Antarctica. Yeah. I mean, I actually, on the podcast, we interviewed Dr. Richard Allen Miller, and Dr. Miller claimed that he had been to Base 211, that he had actually been inside of it. So, but it makes sense. You know, it's a longer discussion, but I did a presentation for the Secret Space Conference
in Bastrop.
In Bastrop, right?
Yeah.
Where I went into that, and it's on YouTube, and you can watch it, and you'll see that I have maps, kind of justifying how I think they got to 211, because you know, it's a hell of a distance from, you know, from the Owl Mountains in Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic now, down to, you know, to Antarctica. That's quite a distance.
It's like 7,000 miles. I believe that's what something like that. It's 7 to 10,000 miles or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and it can be done. It actually, there is technology that the Nazis possessed, which made it feasible. And then they had these cargo U-boats, which were originally mine layers that they had converted into cargo U-boats. And, you know, they were making trips. And there was one that surrendered off the coast of Argentina 2 months after the war ended. There was another one that was caught off the coast of the U.S. And actually, the commanding officer of that one died in captivity in a POW camp, I believe, in Connecticut, and it was carrying these weird cylinders of material, radioactive material, and then it had, I think, 2 Messerschmitt 262s in parts, and then a bunch of scientists and German and Japanese officers. So you know, there was a lot of stuff going on at that time. So it was definitely possible.
Yeah, and I tell you what, Olav, this has been a fast hour with you. Of course, you know, this is going to be part 1 of the discussion with you. Part 1 of the discussion. And we'll have you back on in a few months to discuss maybe part 2 of the discussion. Maybe we will go into the space Nazis and more.
Got to do that.
Oh yeah, and because I wanted to talk just a little bit more about just the secret space program and just kind of just fill everybody in with alternative 3 and that nature. But tell me, Olav, are you optimistic for humanity? Well,
yes.
Okay. Now, so you don't think that the cabal, whatever these figureheads, whatever name you want to give them, you don't think that they are actually going to win over this, or I don't know, they're going to win in the destruction of humanity and break away with this breakaway civilization?
Well, they may break away with the breakaway civilization, but you know, I'm not so jaded that I don't believe in the human spirit conquering all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that there are a lot more of us than them, and you know, I think that we as a group can achieve amazing things when we want to. And I think that if our, you know, I see people walking around, and you know, some people have kids, some don't, but a lot of people have kids, and I think to myself, when things go bad, if they go bad, that all those people have little VIPs, and they will do whatever they have to do to make it a better place for those VIPs. And you know, I've known a lot of people who are parents, and they would do anything, you know. And I think that those people, and there are a lot of just really positive people in the world, and I think that will be triumphant. If you live in a dictatorial society, if you live in a society with an autocratic society, eventually those societies break down. So no matter whether you're the Nazis or you're the Romans or the Greeks or anybody else, if you know, the Romans had an autocracy for 2,000 years, you know, it eventually broke down. It became too big. They couldn't manage it. The emperors became increasingly unstable, you know, and eventually the people rebelled, and they always do. You cannot keep people under your thumb forever. and eventually they will rebel, and when they rebel, they will make the world the place they want it to be. And when you do conspiracy stuff, there's a lot of negative things, and
Mhm.
I like to think to myself that there's a lot of positivity in the world, and then that will fix it eventually.
Exactly, Olav, and very well said.
Thank
And and tell you what, I thank you very much for coming on this show. It's been an honor, a privilege. This is part one of the discussion, and we'll have you on
you.
very soon. And I salute you, my friend.
Well, you know what? You run a great show, and I'll tell you, it's really awesome to do an interview with somebody who's as well read as you are. It makes it really easy because
Hmm.
you know this stuff, and it makes it a real conversation instead of you ask me questions, I give you answers.
Hmm.
We can go places and think about things and talk about stuff because you know so much about it. So it's
Exactly.
the honor is mine. It's an honor to be on your show.
Well, thank you very much, Olav, and I will definitely have you on in the near future, my friend.
Sounds good. Anytime, man. You just let me know when.
And that was Olav Phillips. You can go to his website at paranoiamagazine.com. Check it out. I will have links and about with everything in the description below. Check it out for yourself. Check out his website. He has a lot of great articles on that website. And go to YouTube and just search for Olav Phillips. I'll actually give the lecture to that Bastrop lecture. It was a very phenomenal lecture that he gave. And maybe a few of the interviews also give links in the description also. Anyways, I thank you for all the new subscribers and over the past few days and past few weeks. I really appreciate it. And just like I say, I got a lot of great guests coming soon, coming your way. So you better fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a nice, crazy, mysterious, bumpy ride. Anyways, till next time, keep truthing and have a good one.